But Jeff York worked at the Soho Weekly, I think. You worked at Soho Weekly? All right, and he did a photo shoot of John in 1975, and then worked with YOKO and got to work very closely with John and YOKO right after Double Fantasy came out. And he's published his photos. Most of them published for the very first time about 3 or 4 months ago. And it's a beautiful, beautiful coffee table edition book, of which you'll be treated to some right here tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, and his photo exhibit is upstairs, by the way, so you can see him right in person, too. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Allan Tannenbaum. All right.
They can ask questions afterwards. Okay. Yeah.
Want to sit right there? Whichever makes you comfortable. I'll sit. So Ken had an appointment this evening. He'll be back later or tomorrow. So I'm here. Okay, so Allan, for the folks who don't know you or not familiar with you, why don't you tell them a little bit about how you got to photograph John, first in 1975, and then how it came to be in 1980.
First, I want to say thanks to Mark and everybody associated with the Beatle Fest for inviting me and having me here. And I really appreciate it. It's a lot of fun. And I must say I'm really impressed with the amount of people here and the depth of love for the Beatles and their music. And it's really overwhelming. So thanks for all being here. It's really terrific.
Well, thank you for being here. You know, it was John who made this all possible in 1974 when I went to him with the idea. And he loved it. He said, quote, "I'm all for it. I'm a Beatles fan, too." I will never, ever forget him saying that. I could picture it as if it was right here in front of me. And he helped get it all together.
Well, John is one of the reasons that we're all here tonight. And he's somebody who means so much to me. And I think you'll see it in the photographs. I kind of came of age in the 60s. Yeah, I really can't see with these lights in my glasses, so I'll take them off.
Now there's nobody out there, okay.
I went to Rutgers in New Brunswick. I'm a Jersey boy myself from Passaic,
down the street there.
Right, and I graduated from Rutgers with a degree in art. In the 60s, at least at Rutgers, there were no degrees in photography or filmmaking, so I studied art there, and I started teaching myself photography, and then I went to San Francisco State College in 67 and 68 and studied filmmaking. So I came back to New York and decided I wanted to be a photographer, and I did a couple of things. I taught at Rutgers, and I wanted to work in magazines and newspapers. And I was already in my late 20s, and things were looking a little bleak, and I gave myself a deadline to get a job as a photographer working in the news. And at the end of 73, I was in Ken's Broome Street Bar in Soho, and I saw a new 8-page giveaway newspaper called the Soho Weekly News. And I went to see the publisher there, and he looked at my pictures and said, "Yeah, you know how to take pictures, and you'll see some of the pictures that got me the job there." And he gave me the job, and it was, $5 was my first assignment, and then I got a staff job for $40 a week. The 70s were great. You really didn't need a lot of money to live back then. But and then in 1975, and I loved covering the music scene. I've been a music fan for ages. I forgot to mention that back in the 60s, you could go to places like Fillmore, Avalon, Winterland, see 3 of the best rock acts for a total of like $3.50 or $4. It was just amazing. So being a music lover and a rock fan and a jazz fan, but especially rock and roll, I loved covering the music scene in New York. And when I had the opportunity to meet John at the taping of a special for Sir Lou Grade, I just jumped at it, and that was my first session. And then he went into seclusion for 5 years after that. And when they were coming out of seclusion with Double Fantasy, that's when I came up with the idea with the music editor to do a story on them. They were talking to 5 mainstream national media, and the little Soho Weekly News, because we were a hip downtown paper. And Peter Occhio-Grosso, the music editor, had the idea of doing a story on YOKO by herself, because everybody used YOKO to get to John, which is, of course, what we wound up doing too. So we'll start looking at the photos then?
Sure, why not? Okay. So we'll turn the lights down so that they can see the screen, the stage lights.
And could we have the next slide? I'm going to stand up. It's easier. Add next, please.
I'm going to sit.
This was a picture I took when I was teaching myself photography in San Francisco, and just taking pictures. That's how I learned photography. I didn't study it. Never had a course, and just would take pictures in the street. Next. Typical San Francisco in the 60s shot. Next, please. This was one of the first rock concerts that I ever photographed. It was Jimi Hendrix, and when I went to see the publisher of the Soho News, and he looked at my portfolio, he stopped at this picture and he said, you know, I was Jimmy's publicist. So I thought, well, that's probably a good in, and it was. Next, please. In 1969, I was working for the welfare department in New York City. Welfare at that time, working for welfare department was welfare for college graduates who didn't know what they wanted to do. So I would go around with my camera and just take pictures, and this is what New York looked like in the late 60s and early 70s. So in addition to covering music and the arts, I had interest in politics and economics and other aspects of life. Next, please. Naturally, as an art student, I gravitated towards Soho. And Soho was really an artist community and a center of a lot of art energy and places where artists could get big spaces for really a little bit of money and do their work, whether it was painting, sculpture, performance art, video, music. And this is a view of Green Street. You know, before even I worked at the Soho News, and before Soho became, I guess, a rich people's shopping mall and theme park for Europeans. It's changed a lot, but this is what Soho looked like in the early 70s. Next, please. That's another view of Soho in the early 70s. None of the chic boutiques or fancy restaurants or any of that. Soho was really a place where art was made and creative energy was centered. Next. One of the other jobs I had when I was getting started was a taxi driver. I used to drive a yellow cab. It was quite an adventure, and go to some of the places like Max's Kansas City, which was one of the hip hangouts in the early 70s. Next. And also going to concerts just to shoot, just to learn. This was the Rolling Stones at Madison Square Garden in 1972. Next. And this was the first edition of the Soho News, the 8-page giveaway with my first picture, and it was just the first year of publication. I think it was issue number 10, and that's my photograph of John Cage, the avant-garde composer, at the Avant-Garde Festival in Grand Central Terminal. Next. When I went to go through all my images to do my first book, which is called New York in the 70s, when I looked at the contact sheets, and starting with contact sheet number 1, which was the Avant-Garde Festival, I found it a very ironic surprise that my very first frame for the paper was Yoko Ono at the Avant-Garde Festival. Next, please. That's me. West Broadway and Spring. Next. Okay, next, please. On the right is Yaakov Cohn. He was the managing editor of the Soho News. He was formerly at the East Village Other before he came to the Soho News. So he was an amazing guy, and he took me to meet John, and this is a picture of the two of them together before the rehearsal started. Next. And an amazing picture of John with Tom Jones. What's new, Pussycat? Next. And just some shots of John before they were getting ready to go on. Next. This is John backstage with his band, Bomf, which for many years I thought he was playing with Elephant's Memory, but when I had a show a few years ago and the Daily News published this picture, several members of the band reached out to me and they told me that the name of the band was not Elephant's Memory, it was Bomf, which stood for Band of Mother something. And John had his band wear these life masks, bald life masks of everybody in the band, because at this tribute for Sir Lou Grade, who was this music impresario, showbiz impresario from England, John considered him a bald, two-faced liar, so that's why he had everybody dressed like that. John's little joke. Next. And John performing, and I was just blown away. I mean, this was just amazing to be able to see John performing, being the only photographer there. That guitar player is Joe Krupe, somebody I've become friendly with. Next. And so I just continued to shoot, and John did Imagine and a couple of other songs. I know what they are, but sorry? I don't remember, but if you say so. Next. And John was wearing a red jumpsuit, which was just amazing, and the band was dressed in these black jumpsuits. Next. And as you can see, John was having a great time, so it was just amazing. Next. So 5 years went by. I didn't see John. I would see YOKO at different events, mostly art things, but as I mentioned before, when they were coming out with their new album, in 1980, that's when I decided that we should try to do something with them. And through a contact, I got Yoko's number, and we reached out to them, and they agreed. So my first session with Yoko was going to be for the cover of the Soho Weekly News. And she came down to my studio in Tribeca, and she really dug it because it reminded her of the 70s, and she used to have a loft on Chambers Street in Tribeca. So next, please. So she was wearing a leather jacket and shades and being very aloof and a little bit cold. And I was telling her, Yoko, this isn't going to work for a cover. It has to be a little more engaging. Could you please take off your shades at least? And she did that. And then she took off her jacket and she relaxed. And eventually she came up with this very cute coy pose of playing with her zipper. And then I knew I had the cover. Next, please. Then I said afterwards that we're going to need some black and white to go into the inside of the newspaper. And she suggested I meet her the next day. I went up to the Dakota. We went out to breakfast at the local coffee shop at 72nd and Columbus. And we talked, and then we went back to her office at Studio One, which is the ground floor of the Dakota. And we did some pictures, and then I suggested that we do some shots with John and with Sean. And she said, well, not Sean, but I'll call John. So John came down to her office, and he was really in a good mood. And I said, hi, John, I'm Allan. I met you 5 years ago at Sir Lou Grade. And he said, oh, yes, I remember you. And I don't know if he really did, but he was nice enough to say that. And we hit it off, and we all went for a walk in the park together. Next, please. And they would sit on the bench and talk and giggle and pose. And it was a nice overcast day, which is great for black and white photography. And I was just having a great time. I was just, so happy to be there with them. Next, please. There they are laughing. Then I was really struck by the way that they got along, the way they related. They were really, I could tell right away that they were an amazing couple. Next. And just clowning around for the camera. I know Yoko really liked this shot. Next. And, when I went to do the new book, I had a lot of pictures that I considered my favorites over the years, but I needed more material to make it a whole book. And I went back through my contact sheets and through my color slides, and I found a lot of material that I just overlooked, that I didn't really consider as photographs that I should publish. But, then I found pictures like this, which were just nice little intimate moments of the two of them together. And, this is one of the new photographs that's in the book. Next, please. And next. And I did some portraits of John, and he was joking and wisecracking the whole time. You know, he just was really having a good time. Next. Then on the way back, when we finished in the park, I asked them to pose in front of the Dakota. It's just such an amazing building, and their home, and I just wanted to have a shot of them in front, so we did these, so you could see the amazing apartment building. Next. Their office on the ground floor was also amazing. The bank of filing cabinets that they had there struck me, and I did this shot of Yoko looking for something in the files. John is reading the Soho Weekly News, which I brought up to him that day. Next. And here he is signing albums, double fantasy albums on the back, and of course I asked for one and I got one, and it's framed on my wall at home. Next. This was the cover that came out, Yoko only, because ostensibly it was an interview with Yoko. It was mainly about Yoko. And we did use pictures of her and some of her and John inside. But basically, this was the cover. And ironically, this issue was on the stands when John was killed. So that cover line becomes really poignant. Next. Next. When we were back in their office in the Dakota, I heard them talking about a video that they were going to be shooting for their new album. So I suggested that they have me there as a stills photographer. And Yoko just said, well, we'll see. So I thought, well, maybe that's it. Maybe they'll call me. But 5 days later, I got a phone call from one of their assistants. Yoko and John are in Central Park. Here's where they are. They want you to meet them. I thought, wow, great. This is cool. And I went to the park, and I met their film crew, and they were doing the shot of them walking, which if you've seen John and Yoko's videos, you've definitely seen this image of them walking on this brilliant fall day in the park. Next. And there they are, and that's Don Lenzer, the cameraman. Next. And they paused for a minute, and that's a nice portrait of the two of them that I got. Next, please. After the session in the park, they invited me to go and have a coffee with them at their favorite coffee shop. I think it's La Fortuna on West 71st Street. And so we sat and talked, and afterwards, Yoko said to me, well, John feels comfortable with you, so you'll come with us to the studio. So now I was really getting excited and very pleased. And I got in the limo, and I went with them downtown to an art gallery in Soho. And they had set it up as a film set. And the set was reminiscent of their bedroom or their white room in the Dakota. Next. The scene that they were shooting was pretty amazing. First in the street clothes that they had been wearing in the park, and then in these beautiful kimonos, which you'll see in a minute, they would come into the set, come into the bedroom, and take off their clothes completely and get into the bed and pretend to make love. And of course, by this point, I was just saying, this is incredible. I really can't believe these. I can't believe these pictures I'm getting. Next. But the light, and I know it. Look, I hate to destroy illusions. It's not their bedroom, and it's not daylight. They're really theatrical lights, but it was so beautiful, and I felt inspired, and compositionally, and I had to work discreetly. I mean, their main purpose was not for me; it was for the film that they were doing. But I was able to get a lot of really intimate photographs. Next, and there they are in bed together. Next, the quilt is from their bedroom, and it was all very tender. It's certainly nothing X-rated, and just very, very, very beautiful and intimate. Next, please. At one point, though, when the filming got a little tedious, John made a joke, and I'll leave out the expletive in the middle, but he said, "What is this, Ben-Hur?" And everybody cracked up. The tension broke, and I got that shot very quickly. Next. This is another picture that I really didn't look at or use until after when I was putting the book together. And it was the last scene that they did after the lovemaking in bed where Yoko seems to be in pain. And again, you know, this picture in retrospect seems a bit prophetic. Next. There they are in these kimonos, and they had some imagery which was symbolic. I'm not sure what it meant, but the two pedestals, I guess, and this stairway, I call it a stairway to heaven, and the two pedestals, this reminds me of like a void that happened after John disappeared from us. Next. This picture was the cover of Rolling Stone magazine. Next. And my favorite, which turned out to be the most appropriate for the cover of the book, I thought, was after they finished shooting, they posed for me, and John looked really so happy. And when I went to see them at the Dakota a few days later to show them contact sheets and some prints and some color slides, I was setting up a projector in Yoko's office, and she had sent the material up to the apartment. And John came down, and he didn't see me at first, and he saw Yoko, and he said, "Yoko, these are great." And then he said, "Oh, there you are." And he looked at me, and he said, "You know what I like about your photographs? You really capture Yoko's beauty." And I will never, ever forget John so close and looking at me and telling me that. It means so much to me. Next, please. Next. And there's a portrait of John also from the end of the session. Next. Well, from the last time that I was with them and going over the pictures, and John was making jokes about how difficult it was when he was with the Beatles to decide, you know, which picture they liked the best. He would like one picture, Paul didn't